In this profession, it is impossible to not make mistakes at some point. There's just so many things that can go wrong all the time. We are working really fast. There's a lot of team members. There's miscommunication and different ways to do things. So it's just impossible to not make mistakes. What matters is how we handle ourselves and how we handle the case when we make a mistake. I wanted to record this episode because I was reading about a vet tech, a vet nurse in the States, no, who had removed an intravenous catheter, and when she cut through the tape, she accidentally cut through the catheter as well. So the little bit that was left that didn't have the end bit disappeared into the vein, which is a disaster, right? Because that little bit of catheter is just gonna go all the way through the cardiovascular system and end up in the heart atrium or in a pulmonary artery or something. So the consequence can be humongous. I've also heard of cases where this has happened and then nothing has come out of it and the dog has lived forever happy after. But you just don't know, right? The consequence could be horrendous. And when you do something like that, when there's huge consequences, you feel awful in that moment. That story reminded me a bit of when I was a vet student and we were ordered to give some pain relief to the hospitalized patients. And there was a little Yorkshire Terrier, and it was the first time I was quite new, okay? I was still a student, and it was the first time I was in a hospital environment. And I got a 1 ml syringe, and for some reason, my brain just could not cope with the concept of a 1 ml syringe and how like each unit is like zero point 0.1. I don't know. Now it doesn't even make sense the mistake I made back then. But I think I must have been nervous and quite like preoccupied because I was told to give zero point 0.1 milliliter of methadone to this Yorkie, and for some reason I filled up the whole syringe. I gave 1 milliliter of methadone to this little Yorkie that had a broken shoulder, and it was a 10 times overdose. And it's that moment when you do something and you're like, oh my God, what have I done? Right? Like you feel it, it just washes over you. You made a terrible mistake. And everything, every cell in your body just wish that you could go back in time and not do that thing or do it differently, right? You're like, this cannot happen. Like earth, just swallow me. And it is normal that we feel devastated, right? We made a mistake and maybe an animal could die because of it, or there's other horrible consequences. We're going to have to face owners, give explanations. Maybe like there's going to be some financial consequences of this. The clinics are going to have to pay for it. There was also the time where the vet nurse in Spain, she was doing a dental treatment and it was a bit rough kind of, but back then, like years and years ago, where she was monitoring the anesthesia and doing the dental cleaning. And the dog sort of woke up a bit enough that it kind of moved. And the bit at the end of the endotracheal tube fell off, coughed up the tube, and then swallowed it. So that poor dog not only had a dental clean, it also had a gastrotomy to remove the endotracheal tube that was in the stomach. And it's just these mistakes, it's just stupid mistakes, right? And it's you either didn't think or you didn't act quick enough or whatever it was. And you feel really stupid, you feel devastated, and often there'll be a lot of shame washing over us because our brain goes, oh my God, like, how could you be so stupid? How could you do that? That just like, why did you do that? And we feel so bad about it that often we want to hide. But the thing is, when we feel so much shame and feel so guilty, like if we try to hide it and we don't take responsibility for it, the consequence is just going to be much, much worse for ourselves. In the case of the Yorkie, if I had not said to the vet in charge, actually, I 10 times overdosed this Yorkie, it couldn't have had an antidote, right? If the vet tech hadn't said that the catheter had moved and gone into the dog, they couldn't have referred and I've found the catheter and remove it, right? It could have died of a heart attack. The vet nurse in Spain, I think it would have been difficult not to say that it has swallowed the intratracheal tube. But it was actually a case I saw in another group in Facebook where it had actually happened, where a cat had bitten the intratracheal tube and then inhaled it. Other inhaled it, it sat in the esophagus or something, and they hadn't said that it had happened. And then, then the cat was coughing and such. So if you don't say what has happened, the consequences of your mistake can be even bigger. But I think the consequences for yourself are even worse because you have to live with that. You have to live with, in that moment, your brain is going to want to hide and it's going to want to say, just pretend nothing has happened and just walk away like it never happened because you really want it to not have happened, right? I think that's a very human way of thinking. Like this should never have happened. But you want to acknowledge that you made a mistake. You want to acknowledge it for yourself. Like, let the shame hit. Just let it wash over you. Sit with it. Be all red in the face. Cry if you want. Have to like shake. Go and put some cold water in your face. Like drink it. Just take some deep breaths and acknowledge it. Like just feel all the emotions and just let it wash through you because it's gonna happen, no matter what you do. And if you try to push it away and not face up to what you've done, um, then that all those emotions are gonna sit there, and because you don't process them, they're just gonna sit there like a knot in your chest, right? So you want to take responsibility straight away. This also will determine what kind of person you are long term, right? Who do you want to be? Do you want to be the one that can say, "Oh shit, I fucked up. I'm so sorry," and let's do something about it, or do you want to be the one that hides with the shame in the corner? And I think the times where we don't own up to it and we actually do not say is either because, well, it's a combination of things. No, it's a combination of we already have a lot of self-doubt. We already struggle with self-worth and self-love and all that kind of stuff. And we know that this is going to hit us even harder and we're going to beat ourselves up even more and we're going to feel even less worthy. So if you can just hide it and if it not didn't happen, we can at least preserve some sort of self-worth, right? And there's also the fear of others' opinions. This I've spoken about before. If our self-worth depends on others' opinions of us, the moment we turn around and say to someone, I did this really stupid thing and I made a really big mistake, their face and their body language and what they say to us and what they're gonna say to others is not gonna be very comfortable. And we want to avoid that discomfort and we want them to keep thinking nice things about us. But the thing happened and we need to accept that reality, you know? So I think it's very human to want to not tell it, but I can say both for you and for whatever patient is involved, or even if it's out of work, if it's not a mistake you've made, it is so important to acknowledge and take responsibility for it. So the best thing we can do is process the emotion, right? And just like realize what's happened, just recap with ourselves what's happened, what were the steps I took, what are the consequences, and then let someone know, obviously, as quick as possible. So when we do these things, either let a colleague know, your manager know, let someone kind of know, just so you're not alone with it, and overrule that part of your brain that wants to hide it. Get it out there, no? Get support. Get support for you to feel you're not alone in it, and also to limit the damage if possible. For example, operate out the intratracheal tube, give an antidote to the poor Yorkie who's now high on methadone, and so on, no? And I think it's also important for you to tell someone how you're feeling. So you might tell someone what has happened so you can get like physical support, clinical support with the mistake, but that person might not be the one you want to share your emotions with. So you need to either call your loved one, or if you have a colleague you have a lot of affinity with and you normally share personal stuff with, share how you feel, because you do want to shine a light on that shame, because you want to process and you want to bring it out. If you're hiding how you feel and you try to brush it off, I made a mistake and I'm cool, it's fine, we'll get over it, we all make mistakes, but that's not really genuinely how you feel inside. You're pushing the shame away, and when you let the shame sit in a dark corner, it's just gonna fester. It's going to fester, it's going to grow, and it's going to make you feel bad. It's going to make you wake up in the middle of the night. All that unprocessed emotion is going to come back and bite you in the ass. Ask me how I know. And at the very end of it, when you have, dealt with the case and kind of gone through the whole thing, then, but only after you have processed it, then you can evaluate. You can evaluate. So in my case, what happened? Why did I take a 1 ml syringe and decided with myself that suddenly zero point 0.1 was the whole syringe? I don't know. It has never happened again to me, for sure. So sometimes the fact that it's just happened assures it'll never happen again. I'm sure the vet nurse who clipped through the tape and clipped through the catheter is never going to do it the same way again, right? So sometimes you have to do these things to learn from your mistakes, or you may be hurt. You're going to maybe hurt someone else do it, because I'm definitely going to think twice before I cut through the catheter, the tape around the catheter again, knowing now that this could happen, which is like has unlocked a new fear in all of us, I think, that I've heard about this. And it also has made me think the way, for example, the vet nurse, when the dog woke up a bit and then ended up swallowing into a tracheal tube, has made me think since then how I tie it and where I put the tie in into the tracheal tube. So we can all learn from it. But that's a bit later on. It's not in the moment. All we're gonna do is beat ourselves up. So, what I want to you especially to take away with this rather short episode about mistakes is that first of all, we all make mistakes. And second, if you make a mistake, you have to own up to it. You want to acknowledge it. You want to acknowledge for yourself what you're feeling. And this is also why I say in a lot of my content, like how important it is to learn to feel our own feelings. Because when the shit hits the fan in that moment, you want to acknowledge how you're feeling. You want to be able to feel it. You want to get through it, and you want to be able to process it so it doesn't sit and fester. And you need to tell someone. You need to tell someone like in practicality what has happened. So you can get support, and you can limit the damage as much as possible, if possible. But you also want to get emotional support. You want to speak to someone, speak how bad you feel, how terrible you feel, how stupid you feel. So and just vent with someone and get it out of your head. And then the third thing is then to evaluate so it doesn't happen again, which it very rarely does, right? If we make like a really catastrophic mistake, it's very, very rare we make it again. But sometimes people will then want to change protocols. I remember when I did this methadone overdose in the university, there was another vet. She was a bit annoying actually. She was a kind of in charge, and she was saying like, "Oh, we should never let the students do anything." And it was just, she wanted to go all over the top and not let the students inject anything anymore. But maybe what they did was that then now we have to show what we injected before we give it, which makes sense when you're a student anyway, right? And the last thing I want to say about mistakes is we cannot live in fear of making them, because it's going to stunt our growth as veterinarians if we forever are so afraid of making mistakes that we are forever second guessing ourselves, forever living in a self-doubt, forever double checking everything with everyone, never wanting to make new things because what if I make a mistake? And part of it, the fear of making the mistake, is because we're afraid of how much we're going to beat ourselves up afterwards. But if you do this process where you acknowledge it straight away, I made a mistake, this has happened, these were the steps I did, and this is how I did it, and like out in the open, feel all the emotions, and then have some support to get through it. That's how you know that you have your own back, and you know that no matter what stupid mistakes you make, you're always gonna have your same back, and you're gonna be okay on the other side. And it doesn't matter how many mistakes you make. You look, the busier you are, the longer you're in this profession, the more difficult work you have, the more mistakes you're gonna make. If you just sat at home on the couch watching Netflix, eating crisps all day, you wouldn't make any mistakes because you're not doing anything worth even a mistake, right? If you don't challenge yourself, if you don't put yourself into situations where you maybe you're a bit stressed and you're a bit tired and a lot of things are going on, then you're never gonna make a mistake, but you're also not gonna learn, and you're never gonna grow either as a person or as a vet. So you a little bit of self-doubt is healthy, because we shouldn't just go through life, and those people really, really scare me, the ones that never doubt themselves and they think they know everything. And it's this curve of learning, right? Where we like first we know nothing, and then we learn enough that now I think I know everything. And then you learn a bit more and you realize actually I know only 1% of what I should know. And then finally you start going into the groove and learning a bit more, right? But in order to get through that, you first need to acknowledge that you don't know that much, right? And know that you should probably doubt yourself a bit, and ask questions when you're really in doubt. But you can't go through life over doubting yourself all the time. It has to be a fine balance, right? So here's to earning our mistakes, and let's see how many mistakes you're gonna make this year, and how you're gonna get through them. If you've made a funny mistake, maybe a big mistake that ended okay in the end, the animal was okay, but in that moment you were so mortified and it felt so horrible, and maybe the clients were upset or whatever. Tell me the story, and we can analyze it together, because it's always fun, isn't it? In hindsight, like one of those things you laugh about. See, the mistake I made with a Yorkie, that's now probably 25 years ago, and now I laugh about it a lot. I didn't in that moment. Have a great week, everybody. Bye.